My 7-year-old daughter got suspended from school for calling her teacher stupid and mean. At least that was the version of the story I got when the principal called me at work on a Friday afternoon. The phone rang just as I was walking into an important meeting. I almost ignored it, but when I saw the school's number, I stepped into the hallway and answered. "This is Mr. Davidson from Jefferson Elementary. I need you to come to the school immediately. There has been a serious incident involving your daughter and her teacher." His voice was unusually serious. "What happened?" "There was an altercation during a test. Your daughter verbally assaulted her teacher in front of the entire class." I closed my eyes. Of course, it was Mrs. Bridges again. I had already filed 5 complaints about that woman during the school year. The complaints were never dramatic. I wasn't accusing her of anything outrageous. I simply kept reporting the same pattern. She removed my daughter's classroom aide during tests even though her educational plan specifically required that support. She told my daughter that she was being dramatic when she became overwhelmed. She called her anxiety an attention-seeking problem. She had once held up my daughter's failed test in front of the class and asked why everyone else could finish theirs. Every time I complained, I got the same response. "We will look into it. We will remind the teacher about her accommodation. We understand your concern." Nothing changed. Now my daughter had supposedly insulted the teacher badly enough to get suspended. I told my boss I had an emergency and left work. When I arrived at Jefferson Elementary, Mr. Davidson was waiting outside his office. His arms were crossed. His expression told me he had already made up his mind. "This is completely unacceptable," he said. I didn't answer. He started walking me toward his office. Bennett verbally attacked Mrs. Bridges during a test. She called her stupid and mean in front of 22 students. The teacher left the classroom in tears. My daughter had never talked back to Mrs. Bridges before, not when the teacher took away her aide, not when she mocked her anxiety, not when she embarrassed her over test scores, so I knew there had to be more to this. What kind of suspension are we talking about? 3 days, and I am recommending a behavioral evaluation. I stopped walking. A behavioral evaluation. Your daughter has been increasingly defiant. I stared at him. My daughter had an anxiety disorder. She had an official educational plan. She had accommodations that were supposed to help her participate in a regular classroom. She wasn't some dangerous child who suddenly decided to attack a teacher. Inside the office, Mrs. Bridges sat in a leather chair with tissues pressed against her face. Her makeup was smeared. She looked devastated. Across from her sat my daughter. She was small enough that her feet didn't touch the floor. But when she looked at me, I saw something completely different from the frightened child I expected. She looked almost relieved, and there was a tiny smirk on her face, the kind of expression that said she knew something I didn't. "Bennett needs to apologize immediately," Mrs. Bridges said. I ignored her. I walked over and crouched beside my daughter. "Can you tell me what happened?" Mrs. Bridges immediately interrupted. "She's already admitted what she did." I looked at her. "I wasn't asking you." The room went silent. I turned back to Bennett. "Tell me what happened." She looked at her teacher. Then she looked at me. She took my aide again. Mrs. Bridges rolled her eyes. Then she did something else. "What?" Bennett hesitated. She looked nervous. I gently told her to continue. She wouldn't let Joseph go to the bathroom. Mrs. Bridges sat upright. "That's not true." I raised my hand. "Let her finish." Bennett looked at me. Joseph kept raising his hand. He said he really needed to go. "Who is Joseph?" "Another kid in her class. He has a medical condition that makes it difficult for him to hold his bladder for long periods. His parents had explained it to the school. It was documented. He was supposed to have immediate bathroom access." "What did Mrs. Bridges say?" Bennett swallowed. "She said he should have gone before the test." "Then what happened?" He kept asking. She kept saying no. Mr. Davidson's expression changed slightly. He looked at Mrs. Bridges. She shifted in her chair. "Children need to learn boundaries," she said. Bennett continued. Joseph started crying. He kept saying he couldn't hold it. Then he had an accident. Nobody said anything. I felt my stomach tight. Bennett's voice remained calm. She made him stay in his chair. "For how long?" "The whole test. About 20 minutes. Mrs. Bridges immediately shook her head. "This is being exaggerated." Bennett looked at me. She told the class to look at him. She said this is what happens when you don't follow rules. Mr. Davidson's face had gone pale. Bennett continued. "She said Joseph chose to do it. Then she called him a baby." Mrs. Bridges opened her mouth. I didn't let her speak. "What happened after that?" Bennett looked down. "Joseph was crying really hard. Some kids were laughing because Mrs. Bridges told them to look. His clothes were wet. He looked scared. Then she said maybe he needed diapers." My daughter stopped. I felt tears burning my eyes, but I didn't let them fall. "And that's when you called her stupid?" Bennett nodded. "I told her she was stupid and mean and a bully. Then I helped Joseph to the bathroom." "What did the other kids do?" "They started telling Mrs. Bridges that she was being mean too. Then she left the classroom crying. For several seconds, nobody moved. Mr. Davidson turned toward Mrs. Bridges. "Is that true?" She didn't answer. Mrs. Bridges, still nothing. He stood up. "Good thing we have cameras in the classroom." Mrs. Bridges immediately looked terrified. "That's not necessary." "I think it is." He opened his laptop. My heart started pounding. The school had security cameras in every classroom for safety reasons, although parents rarely saw the footage. Mr. Davidson turned the screen toward us. He fast-forwarded. There was the classroom. There was Joseph raising his hand. There was Mrs. Bridges pointing at him. We watched him ask to use the bathroom. We watched her shake her head. We watched him begin crying. Then the accident happened. My daughter had told the truth, every word. The footage showed Mrs. Bridges making Joseph remain in his seat. It showed her gesturing toward him. It showed several children looking over. It showed her speaking to the class while Joseph sat there humiliated. Mr. Davidson slowly closed the laptop. Mrs. Bridges, my office tomorrow morning, 8 o'clock. She looked like she might cry again. Go home now. She gathered her things without looking at me. After she left, Mr. Davidson looked at me. I'm removing the suspension. I apologize. I wanted to be angry. Instead, I was exhausted. I picked up my daughter. She held my hand all the way to the car. I thought the situation was over. I was wrong. The following Monday, a special education assistant was assigned as the temporary substitute in Mrs. Bridges's classroom. Banette came home that afternoon happier than she had been in months. She talked about school during dinner. She told me the substitute teacher actually let students take breaks. She said Joseph was allowed to use the bathroom. She said the class felt different. Then the substitute teacher pulled me aside at pickup. Can I show you something? She looked nervous. I followed her inside. She closed the classroom door. I found it in Mrs. Bridges's desk. She handed me a thick manila folder. The second I saw it, I knew this wasn't about one bad day. The folder contained accommodation plans for multiple students. There were 8 names. Each plan had been marked in red ink. Ignore, no exceptions, do not allow. My hands began shaking. Then I saw Banette's name. Her anxiety accommodations had been crossed out. Her requirement for classroom assistance during tests had been marked through. Beside it, Mrs. Bridges had written a note telling herself not to give Banette extra help. Then I saw Joseph's plan. His medical requirement for immediate bathroom access had a huge red X across it. Underneath it was a handwritten instruction. No bathroom break during test. The words were underlined 3 times. There was also an email from the district explaining testing protocol. Mrs. Bridges had written in the margin, no exception. I stared at the pages. The substitute teacher whispered that she found the folder shoved into the back of the bottom drawer. Mrs. Bridges must have forgotten to take it when she was sent home. I immediately took pictures of everything. My hands were shaking so badly that some of the pictures were blurry. The substitute teacher made copies. She kept the originals. I took the copies and went directly to Mr. Davidson's office. His secretary stopped me. He's in a meeting. Tell him it's urgent. She said she would leave a message. I sat in my car for 20 minutes staring at those documents. Then I went home. After Banette went to bed, I opened my laptop. I typed the longest email I had ever written. I explained everything. I attached photographs of the documents. I listed every previous complaint I had made. I explained Banette's accommodation. I explained Joseph's medical need. I explained what the folder showed. Then I sent the email to the district compliance officer. It was almost midnight. I read it one more time, then I clicked send. The next morning, my phone rang at 7. It was Joseph's mother. She was crying. Thank you, I didn't understand. She told me another parent had told her about the folder. She had spent months blaming herself for Joseph's bathroom accidents. She thought she had failed him somehow. She thought she hadn't taught him properly. Now she knew the school had been aware of his medical condition. She told me she had already contacted an education lawyer. We talked for almost an hour. We agreed to share information. Neither of us knew how far this would go, but we knew one thing. It wasn't just our children. There were other names in that folder. Other children. Other parents who might not even know what had been happening. A few days later, Mr. Davidson called me into an emergency meeting. He had prepared temporary safety measures. Banette would have her aide present during every test. She could take breaks whenever she needed them. She could visit the counselor without asking the classroom teacher for permission. Joseph would have immediate bathroom access. The other students listed in the folder would have their accommodations reviewed. The measures would remain in place while the investigation continued. It was the first time I felt like someone was actually listening. But the district investigation moved slowly, very slowly. The compliance officer explained that they needed to interview parents, students, teachers, and administrators. They needed to examine records. They needed to review previous complaints. They needed to determine whether Mrs. Bridges had deliberately ignored accommodations or simply misunderstood them. I almost laughed when she said that. There was nothing accidental about writing ignore across an accommodation plan. Then the teachers' union contacted me. A woman introduced herself as a union representative. At first, she sounded friendly. Then her tone changed. She warned me not to make public statements about Mrs. Bridges. She said teachers had due process rights. She mentioned defamation. I asked her whether she had seen the document. She refused to answer. Then she hung up. A few days later, Banette came home from school upset. She said one of the lunch aides had made a comment about certain children getting special privileges. The aide had looked directly at Banette while saying, I documented everything. I had learned by then that documentation mattered. Every email, every conversation, every incident. I wrote everything down. Banette also began seeing a child psychologist. She had started having nightmares about school. Some mornings she felt sick before leaving the house. Her therapist spent 90 minutes talking with her during the first appointment. Later, the therapist told me something that scared me. Banette was beginning to associate school with danger. The therapist documented the symptoms and offered to testify if necessary. For the first time, I felt like we weren't completely alone. Then the district legal department sent another email. They restricted access to classroom security footage because of student privacy laws. Only authorized investigators could view it. They warned us not to distribute copies. I understood the privacy concerned, but I also understood why they wanted control of the evidence, so I started looking for other records. I filed a public records request for the school's bathroom policies from the previous 5 years. I also requested records concerning bathroom access and accommodation procedures. The district had 30 days to respond. 30 days felt like forever, especially when my daughter was still having nightmares. At the next PTA meeting, I heard parents talking. Some defended Mrs. Bridges. They said she was strict. They said children needed discipline. One parent said special needs students shouldn't receive different treatment. Another said some kids simply didn't belong in mainstream classroom. I sat there listening. I wanted to stand up. Instead, I left because I knew the conversation wasn't going to help. The following morning, Joseph's mother called me crying again. The school wanted to move Joseph to another classroom. There were only 6 weeks left in the school year. She was terrified they were going to make him look like the problem. She asked me not to mention his name in my complaint. I promised. Then a certified letter arrived. Mrs. Bridges was officially on paid administrative leave pending investigation. The teachers' union had filed a grievance. They wanted her reinstated. The district also suggested that Banette might benefit from an alternative program. That was the moment I stopped trying to be polite. I wrote back. My daughter had the right to attend a regular classroom with appropriate support. The problem was not her placement. The problem was that the school wasn't providing the accommodations required by her plan. I attached copies of her records. A few days later, Banette came home crying. Other students were saying she had gotten their favorite teacher fired. She locked herself in her bedroom. I sat outside her door. After a while, I asked if she wanted to tell me what she was feeling. She opened the door. We sat on her bed. I gave her paper and colored pencils. Instead of asking her questions, I told her to draw whatever she wanted. For 3 hours, she drew pictures and wrote short sentences. She wrote about being scared during tests. She wrote about Mrs. Bridges taking away her aid. She wrote about her stomach hurting. She wrote about Joseph crying. Then she wrote one sentence that broke my heart. I thought adults were supposed to protect us. I didn't know what to say, so I hugged her. A week later, we had a formal student support meeting. I arrived carrying a binder so thick it barely fit into my bag. I had medical records, previous accommodation plans, email, teacher reports, test scores, my complaints, Banette's statement, the therapist's documentation. The district representative sat across from me. The union representative was there too. She began by saying this was an isolated incident. I opened my binder. I showed her the dates of my previous complaints. She said those complaints weren't formal grievances. I showed her the email. She said they needed to verify them. Then she produced Mrs. Bridges's written statement. It claimed Banette had been defiant all year. There was almost no documentation supporting that claim. I produced emails from other teachers showing Banette had performed well when her accommodations were provided. Then I placed copies of the documents from the drawer on the table. The room went silent. 8 students, 8 accommodation plans, 8 sets of instructions crossed out. The superintendent picked up Banette's document. He stared at the handwriting. Then he looked at Joseph, then at the other plan. The union representative said the handwriting needed to be verified. I almost laughed. It matched Mrs. Bridges's handwriting in her personnel record. Still, the district wanted experts to examine it. The meeting ended without a final decision. They told me not to discuss the matter publicly. I agreed. I wasn't interested in social media. I wanted change. The next day, Banette had another panic episode at school. When I arrived, she was sitting in the nurse's office. The nurse told me she had started hyperventilating after students teased her. But then something amazing happened. Banette used the breathing technique her therapist had taught her. She counted. She slowed her breathing. She calmed herself down. She didn't need to call me. It was a tiny victory. But it mattered. As we were leaving, Mr. Davidson approached me. He asked if we could talk privately. He looked exhausted. He told me the district was putting pressure on him. They wanted the situation resolved quietly. They were worried about lawsuits. They were worried about the union. They were worried about public attention. He said that even with video evidence, removing a tenured teacher could take months. I asked him if he was going to protect the children. He looked at me. Yes. Then he walked away. 2 days later, Joseph's mother called. She had decided to file a federal complaint for disability discrimination. Joseph's medical condition was documented. His accommodation plan specifically required immediate bathroom access. She had emails showing the school knew. We agreed to coordinate. Our lawyers could present the cases separately while showing that there was a larger pattern. By week 6, rumors were everywhere. Some parents wanted Mrs. Bridges back. They said she was a good teacher. They said she kept the classroom under control. Other parents were furious. The division was obvious. Parents whose children had never needed accommodations saw a strict teacher. Parents whose children depended on accommodations saw something very different. I didn't argue with anyone. I just kept documenting. Then I found something that changed everything. While searching old school board records, I found a memo from 3 years earlier. It was about bathroom policies. The principal's signature was at the bottom. The memo clearly stated that students were not to be denied bathroom access. It specifically said accidents should be handled with dignity and privacy. It warned staff that denying bathroom access to a child with a documented medical need could constitute neglect. I printed it, then I printed 5 copies. This destroyed one of the district's possible defenses. They couldn't claim the rules were unclear. They couldn't claim Mrs. Bridges didn't know. The policy had existed for years. The compliance officer finally called. She acknowledged there were serious gaps in how accommodations were being implemented. She proposed mandatory training, starting the following school year, 8 months away. I asked what would happen to the children right now. She said they were working on temporary measures. That answer wasn't good enough. Then Bannett's therapist gave us a detailed clinical letter. She explained that my daughter's anxiety had significantly worsened during the school year. She documented the panic attack, the school refusal, the nightmares, the physical symptoms. She explained that Bannett associated the classroom with fear. The letter recommended immediate changes. Not next year, not after training. Immediately. Then another envelope arrived. This one came from the union's lawyer. It contained warnings about defamation and possible legal action. My wife and I read it. Our lawyer told us not to respond, so we didn't. We stopped talking publicly. We kept our records. We kept attending meetings. We kept supporting the other families. The stress began affecting our home life. I had missed 12 days of work because of school meetings and emergencies. My employer called me into the office. They were sympathetic, but my projects were falling behind. I started working evenings, sometimes until 2 in the morning. My wife handled school drop-off. We were both exhausted, but Bannett needed us. At home, we developed routines, earlier bedtime, breathing exercises, a feelings journal, practice tests in a quiet environment. Slowly, she began improving. She still had anxiety, but she wasn't terrified every morning anymore. Then I sent another formal request to the district. I asked them to preserve all relevant classroom footage. They agreed. Week 9 brought a school board meeting. Joseph's mother stood at the microphone. She didn't say Mrs. Bridges' name. She didn't need to. She talked about children needing dignity. She talked about medical needs. She talked about the importance of believing children when they say they need help. Her hands were shaking, but she finished her 3 minutes. I was proud of her. Afterward, a teacher approached me in the parking lot. She told me Mrs. Bridges had allegedly had similar problems at another school. There had been complaints. Nothing had ever been proven. I wrote down what she told me. Then I waited. I didn't spread the rumor. I didn't need rumors. I had evidence. The following Monday, the school installed a new bathroom sign-out system. Every child had to write their name and the exact time they went. I complained immediately. This could be humiliating for students with medical conditions. Mr. Davidson said it was temporary. I told him temporary policies still affected real children. By week 10, district investigators began interviewing students and parents. The children were promised protection from retaliation. Joseph's lawyer insisted on safeguards. Bannett gave her account. She told them what she had seen. She told them what Mrs. Bridges had said. She told them about her aide being removed. The investigation eventually produced a report. It acknowledged that Mrs. Bridges had violated school procedures, but it stopped short of recommending termination. Instead, it recommended additional training. I was furious. After everything, the answer was training. I stayed up all night writing a federal civil rights complaint. This time, I wasn't just complaining about one teacher. I was challenging the district's failure to properly implement Bannett's accommodation. I submitted it to the Office for Civil Rights. That changed the tone immediately. The district suddenly wanted to negotiate. They proposed moving Mrs. Bridges to another school. They proposed mandatory training. They proposed additional support for affected students. But they wanted confidentiality. Joseph's mother and I met with our lawyers. The lawyers explained that a settlement could produce immediate changes. A public fight could take years. The decision wasn't simple. Some parents wanted everything exposed. Others wanted their children to move on. I went home and talked to Bannett. I asked her what she wanted. She didn't say she wanted Mrs. Bridges punished. She didn't say she wanted money. She didn't even mention the investigation. She looked at me and said one sentence: "I just want to stop being scared at school." That was all. That's what mattered. The settlement papers stayed on our kitchen table for 3 days. Eventually, Joseph's mother and I met with the other parent. 15 families showed up. Everyone had a story. One child was afraid to ask for the bathroom. Another had started having accidents after witnessing what happened to Joseph. Another child had stopped asking for help during tests because they were afraid of being called difficult. These weren't statistics. They were children. The district offered additional therapy, monthly compliance check, mandatory teacher training, immediate accommodation reviews. We agreed to negotiate, but we demanded changes. Mrs. Bridges could not be transferred to another school where she would simply have access to another group of children with disability. The district agreed to place her in an administrative position with no student contact while the disciplinary process continued. We also demanded that training begin within 2 weeks. They agreed. That was when I knew the federal complaint had frightened them. The paperwork took another week. Finally, the agreement was signed. Joseph returned to class with a new teacher. His mother gave the school his medical documentation again. He received a bathroom pass. The first day, he used the bathroom several times. Nobody stopped him. Nobody embarrassed him. His mother later told me he kept touching the pass because he wanted to make sure it was real. Bannett's support meeting happened 2 weeks later. We created a new plan. She would have her aide during tests. She could take sensory breaks. She could test in a quieter environment. She could visit the counselor when overwhelmed. Most importantly, the district agreed not to remove those accommodations during future disputes. The union representative argued about the wording. We argued back. Eventually, we got what we needed. Not everything, but enough. Mrs. Bridges was moved to the administration building. She had no student student contact. The union fought the decision, but the district held firm while the disciplinary process continued. A few weeks later, every teacher in the district received a 3-page notice explaining bathroom policies and accommodation requirements. Students with documented medical needs could not simply be denied access. Teachers had to follow accommodation plans. The principal had to review the rules with staff. Some teachers rolled their eyes. Others seemed relieved. Clear rules helped everyone. Banette took her first major test under the new system. Her aide sat beside her. She wasn't given answers. She simply had someone there to make sure she didn't become overwhelmed. She used her fidget tool. She took 2 sensory breaks. She finished the test. She scored 73%. That number might not sound impressive to everyone. To me, it was incredible. She had previously been getting zeros because she couldn't complete tests while panicking. When I picked her up, she was smiling. She told me she had actually liked taking the test. I nearly cried. Joseph was improving too. His mother told me he was seeing a therapist twice a week. He still had nightmares. He still struggled with certain clothes, but he was slowly recovering. The federal complaint continued. The government said the investigation could take more than a year. That didn't surprise me anymore. I had learned patience the hard way. Then the district created a special education oversight committee. For the first time, they invited parents who had filed complaints to participate. Joseph's mother called me. We should apply. So we did. We filled out the forms together. The kids played in the living room while we worked. It felt strange. A few months earlier, neither of us knew each other. Now we were working together to change the system that had failed our children. The arbitration process involving Mrs. Bridges continued. I didn't know what the final outcome would be, and honestly, I stopped caring about the punishment. I cared about what happened next. Banette had a new teacher. Her accommodations were being followed. Her grades improved. She stopped throwing up before school. She started talking about school without looking afraid. Other children stopped teasing her because the new teacher shut it down immediately. She was finally learning instead of simply trying to survive the day. The biggest lesson I learned wasn't that one teacher could be cruel. I already knew that. It was that systems can protect people even when those systems are slow, but only when someone keeps pushing. Every email mattered. Every complaint mattered. Every meeting mattered. Every document mattered. The folder in that drawer mattered. The camera footage mattered. Joseph's mother speaking at the school board mattered. Banette speaking honestly about what happened mattered. Nothing changed because of one dramatic moment. It changed because dozens of small pieces of evidence eventually became impossible to ignore. Months after everything began, I was sitting at the kitchen table going through the latest paperwork when Banette walked in. She climbed into the chair beside me. "Are you still working on school stuff?" I closed the folder. "Not tonight." She smiled. "Good." Then she asked me something I hadn't expected. "Do you think Mrs. Bridges knows she was wrong?" I thought about it. "I don't know." She nodded. Then she said something that stayed with me. "I hope she learns. Not because I want her to feel bad, because I don't want another kid to be scared of school." I looked at my daughter, 7 years old. She had gone through something no child should have had to experience, and somehow she had come out of it still caring about other people. I told her I hoped so too. The investigation wasn't finished. The arbitration wasn't finished. The oversight committee had barely started. There would probably be more meetings, more paperwork, more arguments, more people telling us to be patient. But Banette was safe. Joseph was safe. And the other children finally had adults paying attention. That was enough for me, because my daughter didn't get suspended for being a bully. She got suspended because she was the only person in that classroom willing to say what everyone else was afraid to say. The adults had failed Joseph. Banette saw it, and she spoke up. At first, the school tried to punish her for it. Then a forgotten folder in a teacher's desk revealed the truth. And that one folder changed everything. Not just for my daughter, not just for Joseph. For every child whose accommodation had been ignored, every parent whose complaint had been dismissed, and every student who had been made to feel like asking for help was something shameful. The system didn't suddenly become perfect. It probably never will, but it finally started moving. And sometimes that's how justice begins. Not with a courtroom, not with a dramatic verdict. Sometimes it starts with a 7-year-old girl looking at an adult who is hurting another child and saying, "You're being mean. You're a bully." And I'm not going to pretend I didn't see it.
Like and subscribe for more videos like these. Thanks for watching.